Here's an example of a report that uses parameters with ad hoc SQL. It's called Product Sales Ad Hoc. All right, so if we go over here to the report data, you can see that we have a data set that returns some information here. And if we take a look at that query, you can see that it's retrieving information from the sales order detail, joining with a few other tables to get a complete set of information. And then it's filtering the data for the sales order date between the begin date parameter and the end date parameter. And then it's sorting on the product category and the product subcategory, the product name, and the order date. So the idea here is that this is going to return a set of information within that date range specified by begin date and end date, and those two values are passed into it as parameters. Okay, so this is just like a data set that's based on a stored procedure. But when you create an ad hoc query like this, you can include parameters, and you use that format of the @ sign and a variable value. So this behavior is identical to how stored procedure parameters are handled. Unlike with parameters for stored procedures, though, reporting services will always set the data type for ad hoc SQL parameters to text. You need to use the Report Parameters dialog box to adjust the data type for any non-text parameters. So I'll cancel out of that and go to the Parameters section here. Notice that we have the begin date and end date. And I'll open up the Properties dialog box there. And as you can see, I've set the data type to date time. Now, you don't absolutely have to do this, but just keep in mind that any parameter values are going to be as text. And so when you use them in expressions or within ad hoc queries or whatever, you may need to do some casting or some sort of manipulation in order to get them into the data type format that you need. Okay, so you just have to be careful. This is an easier way to just have this value treated as a date time. Okay, so I'll go ahead and preview the report. As you can see, it prompts me for the begin date and the end date. In order to get some data back, I have to enter some valid dates for the data within the sales order header table. So that table has order dates that are in the range of July 1st, 2005 and July 31st of 2008. So if I want to retrieve any values, I need to use something within that range of values. But also keep in mind that when you select a date range for this report, there is a lot of data returned by the unfiltered ad hoc query, a total of 121,317 rows. So you probably don't want a date range that spans more than a day or two. All right, so I'm going to enter 8/1/2006 and 8/1/2006. So I'm just going to get a single day's worth of data, and I'll press enter, and there you can see all of those rows. Scroll down, and it's all filtered for that single date. Now here's where specifying the data type for the parameters is a benefit. Because I said these parameters were date time types, SQL Server or Reporting Services is treating them as that, and so it has this nice little calendar selection item here. It initially displays the value that I entered by hand, but if I were to click this without any value there, it would show today's date. And this has the usual functionality. I can change the date by clicking on it. I can also go back a month, so forth, a couple months, as far as I want. But I can also do things like click on the header there, and that gives me all of the months within 2006. I can click on that again, and it gives me individual years for basically the decade or so around that currently selected year. And I can click on it again, and it gives me various date ranges of decades. And that's as far as it goes. But I can still click backwards and forwards, and you can see that it's actually pretty easy to use this calendar pop-up in order to navigate to a date that is a significant distance in time back or forward. And so in fact, if I wanted to select a 2006 date and I didn't have anything entered here, it's actually pretty easy to go back that however many years it is, has been since 2006. Oops, selected the wrong, so let me go back here to 2006, and I can drill down, and I want August and 1st again. Okay, so that shows how you can navigate. And then similarly, there's different input aids for other data types. For example, true-false buttons for any Boolean values that you have as parameters. All right, now notice also within the report, I include this header item here that says for sales between 8/1/2006 and 8/1/2006. It's always a good idea to include in a report the values that were used to generate it, particularly if the user is going to print the report or generate a PDF from it, so that it's clear what values are used for this particular report. Okay, so if I go back over into the design view here, here's the text box that does that. And if I right-click on that and go into the expression editor here, you can see that I have some text, and I'm concatenating on. I'm using the format date time function here, and I'm using the parameters collection to get the begin date value, and I'm formatting it as a short date. And so those are a couple additional functions here, format date and the different date values, that you can use from the category, the set of common functions here. So that shows how easy it is to create an expression that displays the report parameters used to generate this specific data. So as you can see, it's pretty easy to use parameters with ad hoc SQL. But it's always the better case. If you have the choice, you should use stored procedures instead of ad hoc SQL in your reports. Mainly because stored procedures are faster, more secure, and easier to maintain than ad hoc SQL. But you can do whatever you want. You have the flexibility. Sometimes it's helpful to be able to create a parameter that's not mapped to a dataset parameter. This sort of parameter might be used to add some variable text to a heading or to globally adjust a calculation on the report. So you can create different kinds of parameters, some bound to datasets and some unbound that are used for different purposes within the report. Here's an example of a report that uses an unbound parameter. And it's a variation of that product sales report that I just showed you. It includes a third report parameter that applies a special discount that you enter as a decimal fraction, which reduces each product's line total amount. So before I show you the definition, I'll go ahead and preview it here. So I'm going to once again type in 8/1/2006. And then it has this additional parameter value here. And I'm going to enter 0.15 as an additional discount that customers get. And I'll press enter. And it goes out and displays that value and then decreases the amount of the line total by the amount of the discount. So as you can see, we're ordering 2. Unit price is $20. But as you can see here, the line total is no longer $40 and something. It's now $34.32 into account that special discount. All right, so if I go back over here to design and report data, I can look at the parameters item here. And now you can see that we still have the begin date and end date parameters, but also have this special discount. I'll double click on that. And this displays the properties of that. Now, first before I talk about that, if you want to create an unbound parameter, you just right click here and select add parameter. So that's how I entered this special discount. Okay, you can include a prompt, so that's some tooltip text that will appear. You can define a data type, and then whether or not the parameter is visible and whether it allows null values and multiple values and so forth. Okay, and then that parameter value is used 2 places. One here is in the header, so if I right click on that and go into expression, you can see that we're formatting the special discount value there to display it at the top and concatenating on some text. And then here we're using it within a calculation. So as you can see, we're getting the quantity value and then multiplying it by the unit price value that is discounted based on that value. Now, by the way, in the sales order detail table, there's a unit price discount field that is within the table. This parameter is not making use of that. There's no connection whatsoever. Instead, what this report is using is a special discount that's only part of this report.